I'm drinking. I'm tired. I'm just sleepy night. I'm going to sleep. Pomegranate. What's the name of that? The pomegranate. Is it pomegranate? Yeah. Sure. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. So tonight I am going to get into this topic about axiology. So I'm going to speak on the concept of axiology, right? A lot of people are not really familiar with this terminology. I've been knowing about this term for a while. I've been knowing about this terminology for a while. It's part of philosophy. So there's different branches of philosophy. You have the metaphysics, right? Then you have epistemology. Then you have what's called axiology. So of course, metaphysics deals with seeing things from beyond the physicals, dealing with the abstract things. So that's the philosophy. And under metaphysics, you have ontology, which is the state of being, state of existing. Then also you got cosmology, which is also considered as part of being metaphysics too, because cosmology is dealing with the universe from it, although it deals with the study of the universe, but it can also deal with it from a philosophical standpoint. So that's where the metaphysics come in. Okay. And then epistemology is dealing with the study of knowledge in itself. So you're studying the various type of knowledge and getting into the origin of it and the roots of it. And the axiology deals with the study of the nature of value, meaning that the things that we see, how are they valuable to us, and the things that are intangible, how are they valued to us. So we look at things from the concrete and we look at the things from the abstracts. So I'm gonna get into all of that. I'm gonna get into all that stuff, but I think what inspired me to do this topic is because in life we see values in things, especially when it comes to materials. So for us, material has a lot of valuable meaning to us, even though at the end of the day it's still just an object, right? But at the same time, it's more than an object. So it goes into the concept of intrinsic value and extrinsic value, right? So I'm gonna also be explaining that as well. So what I'm trying to do is give myself a little minute, get warmed up here, and hopefully I get some more people on here. If not, then I'll just go ahead and get started. All right, so I want to go ahead and get into the definition. All right. So right here, all right, so I had to extend my screen out just a little bit. So what is axiology? So axiology comes from the Greek word axia, which means value and worth. And ology is study of, okay? It's a philosophical study of value. Includes questions about the nature and classification of values and about what kind of things have value. It is intimately connected with various other philosophical fields that crucially depends on the notion of value like ethics, aesthetics, or philosophy or religion. It is also closely related to value theory and metaethics. The term was first used by Paul Lippi in 1902 and Edward von Hartmann in 1908. Okay. So that's when the term was first used around. And then it makes a distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic value. It's central to axiology. One conceptualization holds that something is intrinsically valuable if it is good in itself or good for its own sake. It is usually held that intrinsic value depends on certain features of the valuable entity. All right. For example, an experience may be said to be intrinsically valuable in virtue of being pleasurable. Mm. Extrinsic value, by contrast, is ascribed to things that are valuable only as means to something else. Substantive theories of value try to determine which entities have intrinsic value, right? Monist theories hold that there is only one type of intrinsic value. The paradigm example of monist theory is Hinduism. The thesis that only pleasure has intrinsic value. All right. And pluralist theories, on the other hand, contend that there are various different types of intrinsic value. For example, virtue, knowledge, friendship, etc. Value pluralists face the problem of explaining whether or how the different types of value can be compared when making rational decisions. Some philosophers state that the value do not exist on the most fundamental level of reality. One such view holds that a value statement about something just expresses the speaker's approval or disapproval of this thing. This position is opposed by realists about value. So, I just want to stop there just for a little bit. So, again, according to the article, as you can see, there's like different level of value on intrinsic value and extrinsic, and also different theories: substantive theory, monist theory, and pluralist theory. All right, so those are the three different type of theories. So the substantive theory says value tried to determine the entities, right? Monist theory said there are only one type of intrinsic value, and that's hedonism, which I'm gonna go into. And also the pluralist theory says where there's various types of values, right? There's various types. There's various types that deals with virtue, knowledge, and friendship. So these three different theories all have their own perception about intrinsic values. Okay. So let's go to Hinduism. Okay. All right. Hedonism refers to a family of theories, right? All of which have a common that pleasure plays a central role in them. Psychological or motivational Hinduism claims that human behavior is determined by a desire to increase pleasure and to decrease pain. And to decrease pain. Normative or ethnical Hinduism, on the other hand, is not about how we actually act, but how we ought to act. We should pursue pleasure and avoid pain. Axiological Hinduism, which is sometimes treated as a part of ethical Hinduism, is the thesis that only pleasure has intrinsic value. Applied to well-being or what is good for someone, it is the thesis that pleasure and suffering are the only components of well-being. These technical definitions of Hinduism within philosophy, which are usually seen as respectable schools of thought, have to be distinguished from how the term is used in everyday language, sometimes referred to as folk Hinduism. In this sense, it has a negative connotation linked to egotistic pursuit of short-term gratification by indulging in sensory pleasure without regard for the consequence. Now let's talk about what could be a good example of both intrinsic value and extrinsic value. So the good example is sex. Sex can be an example of intrinsic and extrinsic, right? Because when you're having sex, and I'm going somewhere with this, okay? So when you're having sex, sex can make you feel, from an intrinsic perspective, it makes you feel valuable. It makes you feel like it makes you feel good. It's more soothing. It makes you feel like you have an emotional bond or connection with the individual that you're engaging with. Sex can make you feel like you're on top of the world. It can take your mind to another place. That's the intrinsic value. But the extrinsic value is being able to do it with the person that you're doing it with. Okay? Whether it be a male or a female. Do it with that individual. And you guys engaging into the activity. Engaging into the performance. All right? Now, there's some people that feel like sex has no value. Okay? Sex may not have no value if you don't see it, if you just doing it just for the sake of it, or if you're being forced against your will, you may feel that way. But then there are those who say sex does have values. Besides making children, which is procreation, you got to look at the recreational part of sex. So having sex can bring intrinsic value and extrinsic value at the same time. That's one example. Another example of intrinsic value. Life. Well, how do we describe life first and foremost? What is life? Life can mean various things. Life can mean something from a concrete point of view, and it can mean something from the abstract point of view. So life is going through the cycles of living, right? And life can also mean life can also mean organism. It can also mean living beings. So there is different meanings to life. Also, the concept of love. Well, what is love? A lot of people don't know what love is. There is multiple levels of love. There's different type of love, right? So can love be seen? Not from a physical standpoint, but love can be seen based on the abstract. So the abstract of love is what brings the axiology of it, because it can mean something pleasurable. It can mean having an emotional bond to something or a person. Love can bring out the symbolism of an object. So, like for example, when we see a heart represents love. So the heart shape represents love. That's the symbolism. But if you take away the abstract, it's just a heart. So that is the examples of the axiology, the intrinsic and extrinsic values. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna go over the different components of love because there's different types of love. Okay, but let's look at the history of axiology. So, the history between the 5th and 6th century BC, it was important in Greece to be knowledgeable if you were to be successful. Philosophers began to recognize that differences exist between the laws and morality of society. Socrates believed that knowledge had a vital connection to virtue, making morality and democracy close intertwined. Socrates' student Plato furthered the belief by establishing virtues which should be followed by all. Okay. So EJ, I don't know how to say this person's last name. Okay, but let's just say EJ found that axiological anathesis characterized the philosophy of ancient Greece. Typical Greek habit of thinking in axiological anathesis of always wanting to decide which of two comparable activities, property, or qualities is the higher, the better, the nobler, or the more perfect. The Pythagoreans set the finite above the infinite, the odd above the even, the square above the rectangular, the male above the female. I had to laugh at that one. Plato never tires of arguing how much superior ideas are to appearance. Aristotle contrasts the imperfection of the sublunary sphere with the perfection of the celestial sphere. Thus, uniform motion is also superior to non-uniform motion. A regular polyhedron is of greater value than any other polyhedron, but is itself surpassed by the sphere. All right, with the fall of the government, values became individual, causing skeptic schools of thought to flourish, ultimately shaping an ontologically objective philosophy that is thought to have contributed to Christian philosophy. During the medieval period, Thomas Aquinas made the distinction between natural and supernatural theological virtue. This concept led philosophers to distinguish between judgments based on facts and judgment based on values, creating a division between science and philosophy. Okay, so understand this. Science is based on facts, right? And philosophy is based on the values. So that's how it is best understanding. Science is based on facts. Philosophy is based on values. But here's the thing. Science came out the school of philosophy. I'm going to repeat that. Science came out of the school of philosophy because it was philosophy that gave the foundation to science. How? Because it gave foundation to knowledge. And so without philosophy, there will be no form of knowledge. And without the knowledge, there will be no form of science or any other subjects that we know in our lives. So science deals with the facts, right? But philosophy deals with the values. So at the end of the day, we all are philosophical in our own way because we all see values of things in our own way. What may be valuable to one person may not be valuable to another person. And then what may be valuable to that person may not be valuable to that other individual. So it's all based on our perception. Somebody might see that $1 million chain, right, is valuable, it's worth the money. But somebody like me looking at that $1 million chain say it's not worth the money. It's not worth $1 million. Because years gone by, right? Let's say 15 or 20 years from now, that same chain that you bought for $1 million, the value of it will depreciate. So what do I mean by depreciation? That means that the value of that chain is going to go down. So it's not going to be worth that $1 million. So when you go and try to take it to the pawn shop and sell it, or if you're trying to pawn it off, you're probably going to get $750,000 off of that chain, or you might get less than that. It depends on what the pawn shop is, right? So again, so what the value of that particular object may not be the same to anybody else who you try to sell it to or pawn it off to. They may not see it as being that valuable amount, so they might not give you exactly the amount that you paid for. So we have to look at how things can be depreciated. Okay. It also speaks about religion. So for many people who are in Abrahamic religion, especially, they see the values of the concept of God. They might see value of Jesus Christ down on the cross for everybody's sin and ascending to the heavens as a symbolism of God is forgiving humanity for all their wrongdoing. God forgiving humans for their behavior. Muslims see the value in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, although they never seen who Prophet Muhammad was. They never seen a picture of him. But they read stories about him. But they know that he's valuable. Why? Because according to the Islamic tradition, he's considered as the last prophet out of all prophets. Now, in some Islamic custom, they don't believe that Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet. They believe that there is another prophet that's going to come after him, right? They believe that there is another caliph or whatever. But in most in Sunni Islam in particularly, they believe that there is no other prophet after Prophet Muhammad. There is no other prophet. He's the last prophet. So Prophet Muhammad means a lot more to the Muslim than all the other prophets that came before him. He means the most because he's the messenger. He was a chosen one. All right. And also in Judaism, in the Torah, in the Tanakh, Jehovah, Yahweh means a lot. The first 5 books of Moses has a lot of significance to it. Now, there's some that do believe in the New Testament, but there are those who just follow the first 5 books of Moses because they believe that the information that Moses had was more valuable to them and has more significance. So this is where the conflict of religion comes into place, where there's this group over here versus this group because they feel like their God is more superior than this God over here. But at the end of the day, nobody ever seen what God looked like. Nobody ever seen what nobody actually seen a true depiction of Jesus. Nobody ever seen a true depiction of Muhammad. Nobody ever seen a picture of Moses. Nobody ever met these guys. But because of how they were appointed to each religion and their doctrines, right, is what make them more significant and valuable. Okay? Just like there's people who see value in Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Marcus Garvey. But at the end of the day, they all are humans. That's what they have in common. They're humans at the end of the day. And they have made human errors. They have made mistakes. But there are those who see them from a higher level, and they give them higher status and regards, especially Elijah Muhammad. He get the highest status. They not just looking at him as, oh, he was the leader of the nation of Islam. They looking at him as, oh, he was the prophet. He was the messenger. He was the chosen one. Right? But yeah, that goes into the Axiology. All right. And here it talks about ontological status of values. So the ontology deals with the state of existence, right? It's a study of existence, a study of being. Okay. So in Axiology, it is often important to distinguish between the entity that is valuable and the features and virtue of which it is valuable. For example, an experience may be said to be valuable in virtue of being pleasurable. This distinction is particularly relevant for intrinsic value, since it is commonly held that the intrinsic value of an entity supervenes on intrinsic features. This means that the entity could not have a different intrinsic value unless it had different intrinsic features. That's deep. Now, let's skip down. It says the preceding discussion about ontological categories of values and value barriers assume some form of realism that there actually are valuable things. But the difficulties in reaching expert consensus in value relate fields like ethics, aesthetics, politics, consideration from naturalism have led various philosophers to doubt this assumption. This ensuing dispute between cognitivists and non-cognitivists is usually held on the level of value statements or value attitudes, either concerning all values or specifically concerning ethical values. Cognitivists asserts that value statements are true, i.e., are either true or false, which is denied by non-cognitivists. Most cognitivists are realists about values. They believe that values are part of reality. Error theory, as originally articulated by J.L. Mackey, is an exception. Error theorists hold that all values statements are false, and thereby true because the world lacks value features that would be needed to make them true. Wow, it's pretty deep. It says this challenge. Oh, hold on. Well, this position. No, where did I go? Let me start over. Okay. Non-cognitiveness, on the other hand, goes one step further by denying that value statements are true. This position involves the difficulty of explaining how value statements can be meaningful despite lacking a true value. This challenge can be met in different ways. Emotivists following A.J. Iyer state that value statements only express the emotion of the speaker and are intended to influence the action of the listener. Prescriptivism, let me try it again. Prescriptivism, as developed by R.M. Hare, interprets value statements as imperatives or commands. Simon Blackburn's quasi-realism states that values statements project emotional attitudes as though they were real properties. All right, so so you have those who are cognitivists and non-cognitivists. Cognitivists believe that values are based on are part of the reality, and non-cognitivists say, nah, it's not based on reality. It's more so based on people's perception, but it could be false. So let's give it a great example. So let's talk about crystal. All right, the little crystals, the little marble things. Okay. People feel like crystals have valuable meanings because it gives some type of energy, or it's supposed to give some type of energy. Well, but at the end of the day, that's based on perception. That's subjective. Because just because one look at a crystal does not mean that it's going to magically do something. It's going to make you more energetic, right? But the ideal of the crystal is what gives the value of it. The crystal brings about some form of symbolic meaning. So it's more than just a decoration. It's more so of feeling that idea and that thought of having a spiritual connection. So when you look at the crystal or you rubbing the crystal, it makes you feel like you have some type of spiritual connection, right? But at the end of the day, it's just a crystal. It's just a decoration. It's just a marble. But what does a crystal do? Nothing, right? So yes, I won't get into any more, but for those who are just coming in, if you guys want to see what I'm talking about, you have to look at the video from the very beginning. Okay. Now let me go into this book right here. Oops. That was a mistake. Okay. All right. So this book right here is called The Nature of Value, the Axiological Investigation by Raymond M. Lemos. Okay. So this book was written in 1995. And in this book, it has different table of contents, value and psychological phenomena, value and valuing and evaluating, levels of psychological phenomena, terminological remarks, ontological categories and barriers of values, states of affair, propositions and values, states of affairs as barrier of values, propositions as barriers of values, abstractica and concreta as barriers of values. All right. So, of course, it goes to the intrinsic, extrinsic, and total values. Okay. And then it talks about the definition of proof, knowledge, and intrinsic values. Okay. All right. So yeah, I just wanted to give that read material out. So for you guys, you should check out those read materials for yourself as soon as possible. Yeah, just look up The Nature of Value, Axiological Investigation, Raymond M. Lemos. Okay, now let's look up the different type of love. Since we going back on the subject of love, what is love? The various types of love. All right, so let's go back to the definition of the word love. We love to use this. Oh, excuse me. Okay. We love to use this terminology, love, a lot. But what does love really mean? Do we actually know what love is? Well, let's see what they're talking about here. So love encompasses a range of strong and positive emotional and mental states, from the most sublime virtue of or good habit, the deepest interpersonal affection, to the simplest pleasure. An example of this range of meaning is that the love of a mother differs from the love of a spouse, which differs from the love of for food. Most commonly, love refers to a feeling of a strong attraction and emotional attachment. Now, love is a complicated word. Love is a complicated definition because it can be described multiple ways, right? Now let's go down to where it says that it says it may also describe compassionate and affectionate action towards other human other humans, oneself, or animals. In its various forms, love acts as a major facilitator of interpersonal relationships, and owing to its central psychological importance, is one of the most common themes in the creative arts. Love has been postulated to be a function that keeps human beings together against menaces and to facilitate the continuation of the species. Ancient Greek philosopher identifies 6 forms of love. Uh-oh. Now here it is. This is what I'm looking for. All right, so there is 6 forms of love. So what are the 6 forms? Though there are more Greek words for love, variance, and possibility, subcategories, a general summary considering these ancient Greek concepts is as follows. Agape. Agape means love, especially brotherly love, right? Charity, the love of God for man and of man for God. Agape is used in ancient texts to denote feelings for one's children and the feelings for a spouse, and it was also used to refer to a love feast. Agape is used by Christians to express the unconditional love of God for his children. This type of love was further explained by Thomas Aquinas as to will the good of another. So, and you got Eros. Eros means love, most of the sexual passion. The modern Greek word erotos means intimate love. Plato refined his own definition. Although eros is initially felt for a person with contemplation, it becomes an appreciation of the beauty within that person, or it even becomes appreciation of beauty itself. Okay. Plato does not talk of physical attraction as a necessary part of love, hence, the use of the word platonic to mean without physical attraction. In the Symposium, the most famous ancient word on the subject, Plato has Socrates argue that eros helps the soul recall knowledge of beauty and contributes to an understanding of spiritual truth, the ideal form of youthful beauty that leads us humans to feel erotic desire, thus suggesting that even the sensually based love aspires to non-corporeal spiritual plane of existence that is finding its truth, just like finding any truth lead to transcendence. Lovers and philosophers are all inspired to seek truth through the means of eros. All right, then you got phila, which the word Philadelphia comes from the word phila. Phila means affectionate regard, friendship, usually between equals. It is a dispassionate, virtuous love, a concept developed by Aristotle. In his best known work on ethics, was it Nicomachean Ethics? Phila is expressed variously as loyalty to friends, specifically brotherly love, family and community, and requires virtue, equality, and familiarity. Furthermore, in the same text, philos is also the root of philo, philo, philolucia, denoting self-love and arising from it. A general type of love used for love between family, between friends, a desire or enjoyment of an activity, as well as between lovers. Okay. Then you got storage or storage, means love, affection, especially of parents and children. It is the common or natural empathy that felt by parents for offspring, rarely used in ancient works and then almost exclusively as a descriptor of relationships within the family. It is also known to express mere acceptance or putting up with situation as in loving the tyrant. This is also used when referring or referencing the love for one's country or a family sports team. And this one is Philolucia. Philolucia means self-love, to love oneself or regard for one's own happiness or advantage. Has been conceptualized both as basic human necessity, as a moral flaw akin to vanity and selfishness, synonymous with amor propriety or egotism. The Greek further divided this love into positive and negative one. The unhealthy version is the self-obsessed love, and the other is the concept of self-compassion. And then you have Xena. So Xenia is ancient Greek concept of hospitality. So in the South, we call this Southern hospitality. So for Southern hospitality, it'd be Xenia. So it is the concept of hospitality. It is sometimes translated as guest friendship or ritualized friendship. It is an institutionalized relationship rooted in generosity, gift exchange, and reciprocity. Historically, hospitality towards foreigners and guests was understood as a moral obligation. Hospitality towards foreign Hellenists under Zeus, Xenos, patrons of foreigners. All right. So again, these are the Greek words for love, and and uh, this is the information comes from Wikipedia. Okay, so as you can see, there is not really a one definition of love per se. So love can be both physical and it can be non-physical. Love can be concrete and it can also be abstract. So there is not like one definition for that word love. All right. So love can have its complexity, but love does tie into the concept of axiology. All right, then. So there's nothing else left for me to talk about on this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope I did a good job at explaining this concept of axiology. If not, again, you guys can check out the book, and I'll make sure that I load up the information on my social media page for those of you who are interested. You can just go ahead and look it up for yourself. But anyways, I thank you guys for watching. I appreciate for you guys subscribing to the channel and sharing this videos. And till next time, I will reconnect with you all later, and I will come back on other subject matters. So until then, this is your girl Tiffany, and I'm logging off. With that being said, peace and power, elevation be to all of you. Take it easy, and I'm out.